So you had a case of George Zimmerman, who we know has a history of violence, in fact, beating women, and he felt called upon to roam his area with a gun, looking for anyone who was guilty of being black or, in his terms, suspicious. And then he escalated the situation. We don't know exactly what happened in those final moments, but it's very clear if he wasn't following Trayvon Martin, who actually was tragically and ironically staying with his father in the complex in which George Zimmerman lived. So Trayvon Martin was, in fact, a temporary resident of that complex. But he was just shot for being black. If you look at it, if Zimmerman hadn't been armed, carrying concealed, then this incident wouldn't have occurred. But he became, in essence, a vigilante, taking an injustice into his own hands because there was no crime that had occurred. Trayvon Martin was shot purely for being black and wearing a hoodie. Regardless of whatever those last unknown circumstances were, I mean, if Trayvon Martin was, trying to push George Zimmerman away because he had jumped out of his van and was approaching, Martin. Martin was standing his ground. He just didn't have a gun. So I wonder if they were both armed. But Trayvon Martin wasn't. All he had was a candy bar in his hand. It was the person who was armed that caused the situation and killed someone who was simply innocently walking as a U.S. citizen on a U.S. street. So we're allowing these murders, in this case, I would call it. A jury didn't call it a murder, but I think it's pretty clear it was that Zimmerman created the situation in which Martin was killed and shot him, and that Martin was not up to any criminal activity of any sort other than, if you want to call carrying a candy bar criminal activity. But it's this emotional need on a part of someone like George Zimmerman, who's actually someone who commits violence. You were talking about the good guys before. Well, the NRA made him a hero. He was signing cards, I read, at some sort of gun show or gun shows recently, a couple months ago. And so he's sort of a hero to the NRA, but a hero of what? Just killing a black teenager? And also, what's the double standard here on the part of the NRA? Zimmerman is a known wife beater. He beat his wife, he beat his girlfriend, and is guilty of domestic violence. So who are these heroes to the NRA? Exactly what are they holding up as the gold standard of U.S. citizenship, other than that I'm a white guy and I have a right not only to have a gun but to shoot anyone I think is suspicious. In a situation like you had here in Florida where there was no crime being committed by the person who was ultimately killed. So this is where guns have become the nightmare, tragically and ironically, that Wayne LaPierre claims is out there. What is out there is this nightmare of so many people having guns like George Zimmerman did.
Well, what is out there is, as you call them, it's fear. It's fear-driven behavior, and that always rests on, fear is the biggest motivator of all. And when you stir it up, people respond in just the worst possible ways. There's another element to this, in that these people are generally cowards. Yes. It doesn't take much of a hero to walk around with a gun and go after people and sneak up on them and claim, you were at risk. Zimmerman was told to stay away, but he went after it. He was thirsting for action, and he took a life. He's not a hero. He's a coward. He's a bully. He's all those things. Whether he beat his wife or his girlfriend is, just a comment on character. The point is that what he did was cold-blooded murder.
Well,
And
I think I would just add, I do think the fact that he has a history of domestic violence, and particularly it's aimed at women, is a factor because, as you said earlier, the NRA is always saying that it's only the good guys who have guns that don't commit crime. It's only the bad guys, so don't keep the guns out of the hands of the good guys. But a lot of these so-called good guys actually have committed violence. In this case, a woman beater. That's essentially what George Zimmerman is. And there's a very fine line between what is a good and a bad guy. I mean, George Zimmerman shot an innocent civilian teenager. Is he a good guy or bad guy now? He beat women. Is he a good guy or bad guy? He's a hero to the NRA and the gun guys, and yet he kills someone and he beats women. So what is their argument worth about the good guy should have the guns? They believe he should have a gun. And yet, by any standard of civilization, he is not a good guy.